budget for fiscal year 2025 and management reserve. Mr. Pittard, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome to everybody. We go through today our proposed capital budget. As you know, each year we have to submit that to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. Shannon was just asking me how the clicker worked and get it to work. Anyway, so y'all know each year we have to take it to CTB, and that's by February 1st. It's in our code, our enabling code legislation. And this week we'll present to them, and then we'll go back hopefully in March and ask the Commonwealth Transportation to approve our capital budget. That being said, that legislation, our code section does say that we shall submit an operating plan. And so we have appended that operating plan. It's very preliminary. It's part of that financial planning window that, if you recall, when we do our budget, we look at the entire life of our capital projects, which this year we did add a year to that. I'll talk a little more on the next slide. So basically adding that year and then taking a look at operations, which we have to do to figure out the total sources of funding and then the total uses, because we definitely want to be able to operate our trains. So there is one little change from bringing this up, because there was a change from our finance committee that we did add that operating plan to the very end of the budget document we have. But I want to stress that preliminary. It's because we've learned from past years that we have enough data today to bring you a good operating plan. You'll recall last year there were changes between draft and final, and this year we decided to use a preliminary in that process, come back, and then in May we'll have a much better plan. We'll work with Amtrak. We'll know what our next year's contract is going to be for operations. We'll have a better idea where we are as far as staffing and payroll costs. Our administrative budget will be a lot tighter. One other thing, we're actually working on cost allocation plan so that we can get true cost of all our capital projects, true cost of our Amtrak operations. And our goal will be to have that. Let me say, not goal. Our plan will be that it will be implemented by July 1st. That too will have an impact on that operation. So with that being said, this is a high-level view, and I'm going to take you through this, and I'm going to hand it over to Shannon to take you through all the detail. But at a real high level, the main things I would like to make here are, in May, you recall we had an significant unfunded balance, $705 million. And that was how our budget came to you, had a shortfall. We asked you to have faith in us that we had different ideas of how to fill that gap. Had a lot of talk that we've got these federal grants, so we're going to fill that gap. So today, it's pleasure, I can say that there's an equal sign up here when we're looking at January of 25. Our sources of funding equals our uses. So that being said, there are within this plan, I'll steal a little bit of detail. And we've got $1.31 billion, $829 million. You add a year of FY31 revenues, it's $330 million or so. And then we also, you heard we've been working on with Amtrak on our ticket revenues. Those changes to our ticket revenues, when we push them through over a 6-year window of planning, had over $100 million positive impact. So those are the big forces. On the uses side, sticking with where we were last May, the unfunded, the required projects, we thought that is priority one. You know, what we've signed up to do, what we have commitments to do, that's priority one. You know, take care of that unfunded, 705. In addition to that, there are the FY31 expenses. So we added in the 31 sources of funding. We have to add in the 31 expenses of running the trains, you know, our administrative costs. So that's about, there was 335 million of revenue, I think, and about 310 million of expenses. And then finally, there were a few parts. required projects on the sidings, there were some budget adjustments as we moved closer through engineering. And as we talked about earlier, the Western Rail $200 million adjustment. So those are a high level what's going on with the budget. Overall, very positive news. I'm going to hand it over to Shannon, and then Mike's going to come up a little bit later and talk a little more. Like we added the FY30 to the schedule, and also to talk a little bit about a new project that we're also recommending the budget. Yeah.
Excellent. So I am going to dive into the details on the sources and uses side. Before I do that, I just want to note we're doing this a little bit differently this year now that we have our reserve policy in place. We're going to be showing these sources accumulating into a working management reserve, and then we're going to make recommendations on where to take those sources and put them on uses in the plan. So that's what we're going to walk through now on the sources side. So overall, as Steve mentioned, really positive year. We brought in a lot of sources to our plan. On the left-hand side, you see the Q1 update. You all will be familiar with this. This is what you approved back in December for our management reserve balance, the changes impacting that balance. And we're going to talk through is the FY25 financial planning window changes. So bringing in another $1 billion into our plan. So the big one here being the Fed State Partnership Grant, adding another $729 million on the sources side. The next three are changes to that financial planning window. So revenue sources already in the plan, but adjusting assumptions underlying them. So Steve noted a lot of that being our Amtrak revenue. So as you've seen in the EDR report, our actual revenues consistently beat our budgets. We've adjusted the assumptions there, conservatively bringing another $74 million into our plan. Another one to note is the $20 million on our interest and realized gains. So forecasting what the interest rates are today and what they will be in the near term, we do feel comfortable and confident we'll be able to bring in more revenues related to our investments. And the last one, as we're shifting that financial planning window out a year, we are picking up additional year of revenues. What this is made up of is another year of our CRF revenues, so our Commonwealth Rail Fund revenues, and then another year of our train operation revenues as well. So as we shift over, we're picking up those revenues, as you'll see in some later slides on the uses side, we're picking up those expenses as well. So as you can see, we've got our growing amount in sources. So this tying to our financial planning window that we talked about before. So we got the $6.4 billion that we had last year, and now we've increased that to $7.7 billion. And along the bottom, you see that management reserve balance growing as well.
Yes, this is cash base.
This is accrual basis accounting,
Okay.
actually. So
I know the 7.7 is would be accrual, but the 6.5, that's accrual too.
It's all accrual
It's all
accounting,
accrual.
Yeah, and from a financial planning perspective, it really, you could look at it more of a
Right.
cash basis, but yeah, we do look at it from accrual and a cutoff perspective, yeah.
And it's all estimates.
Right.
You don't know.
So, yeah, what do we look at?
Okay. So this is a bit of a different look, just to kind of show it a little bit visually for how that accumulation is happening in the management reserve balance. So that gets you to the $1.4 billion that we brought in over the year. And then the next slides, we're going to have $1.3 billion of recommendations. We're going to take that money and put it to different projects, applications, and grants. What that will leave us with is $130 million in our management reserve. And that's what we'll be recommending throughout this plan is where we're going to go with those uses. So with that, we flip over to the uses side, because I know that's the big bulk of this, is where are we going to be spending these dollars we brought into the plan. $1.2 billion is a lot of money to explain where we're putting it. So we broke it down into kind of bite-sized, digestible pieces. So it's 4 categories that we're really looking at. So we have that we're going to be funding our previously unfunded balance. This is our first category. The second is that we're adding the uses. So we have brought in the sources for FY31. We also have additional expenditures going out in that year. So we're adding that as a category as well. We have some net base budget changes. So projects already in the plan, but we're changing the budget estimates for those projects. And then we have new budget items as well. And this, of course, is by our budget component. We're going to go into each of these in detail in the next slides as we move through the uses side. Okay. Starting with our most complicated corridor, like we usually do, is the I-95 corridor. So at any point on this, please stop us. We can answer any questions as we move through it. This format is going to be consistent for the next 5 slides. So what it's going to show is the detail on the project. For capital projects, we're also going to detail the estimate level. So how good are the budget estimates informing the numbers that we have up here for FY25? Then we have our FY25 budget, FY24 budget, and then the change between those 2 years. And then over on that right-hand side, those again are the categories explaining the changes that you're seeing here. So we're going to start with the unfunded balance. We were able to fund those phase 2 projects we had previously said were unfunded in the prior year. We're able to fund them with the new sources we brought in, funding that $699 million shortfall. I'm going to pause as we've been briefing people. We get a lot of questions like, how does this tie back to the grant we got for the $729 million? So what we have here is $699. When we went in to do our application, there's also an unfunded position on the L'Enfant fourth track, which is a VRE project, and it was $30 million at the time. We need to complete that project to get the service, so we included it in that grant application. And now that we got the full award, we're actually able to go ahead and give that $30 million to VRE to fund L'Enfant. So you'll see here, we do have a $30 million contribution. It's just in the new budget items. We're trying to just make sure it's clear and tell us thing back. So wanted to head that question up. So that gets us back to the 729. Moving on to the base budget changes. Steve already mentioned this, so we do have some adjustments. All of these relate to our sidings. Now that they are actually under contract with CSX and we're moving through engineering, we have a much better understanding of what it's going to take to deliver these projects. They're required, so we do want to reflect the budget estimates in this capital budget. Then our last item, the new budget items. We've already talked about the L'Enfant contribution, bringing that fourth track fully funded position in VRE's capital program. And then we're also going to be recommending that we do the construction for King and Commonwealth bridges. As you'll remember, we did fund the final design for these projects. And now that we have an informed cost estimate and we have the funding available, we are going to recommend we go ahead and fund the construction of this. And at this point, Mike is going to come up and he's going to talk about this project in more detail. Any questions on this corridor and all the changes before we pivot off?
And actually, before I start, the L'Enfant project, this question comes up a lot. We purchased, or middle of purchasing, rail line from CSX. And it's really important we get to a place called CP Virginia. Actually, Washington, D.C., and that was confusing. That is the two passenger trains from here in Amtrak going to Union Station, two trains going to CSX and Virginia Avenue Tunnel. The last 9/10 of the milepost, and Long Bridge, for instance, ends at milepost 111.5. L'Enfant project begins at 111.5. The last 9/10 of that track we need that for a dedicated 2-track corridor is the L'Enfant, what we call the L'Enfant project. Rich stores some trains there now, but we're going to put a 4-track around the current platform, which make an island platform, elongate the platform. It's very important that we added that to our Fed-State partnership application, because without that project that's in the qualified list of exhibit of projects with CSX, we would not get the service that would come with doing Long Bridge, the sidings, other projects, because you need that dedicated 2-track corridor. So I just want to point out, because this question has come up before about L'Enfant. So it was on VRE's books before. They're a great partner with us, which is a great segue. They're going to be a great partner for us at King and Commonwealth.
And it was in the application.
What? It was in the application, because we had received feedback from a previous application for Long Bridge from the MPDZ, the MPDZ program the year before. The Long Bridge itself doesn't get you the service. You need all the phase 2 projects. L'Enfant was listed with CSX as a phase 2 project. So that's why we wanted to fill that. They're not, I don't know if they're level design. They want to say what the exact cost is, but we gave it a good estimate of what the gap is. In addition to $22 million we have in our, but we already had in our budget for a while. We're a great partner. We're in each other's boards.
Thank you for that.
So anyway, King and Commonwealth. We have talked to you about this before, but it's been a little while. I think Fi is back there, and he's offering to be my former friend along with Todd next to him, in case I run into trouble here. Presented on this I think it was last spring. But King and Commonwealth, as you can see, so it's right in Alexandria, just north of the King Street Metro Station and King Street VRE and Amtrak Station. If you've been underneath the King Street portion, for instance, you'll see that it is not the greatest gateway into Alexandria. There is some scaffolding up above the walkway. It's very narrow, especially for King Street. And then once you get south of it, it opens up into beautiful Old Town Alexandria. But so you understand from a pedestrian point of view, from a rail point of view, these bridges geometrically need to be raised to, the rail bridges need to be raised to a level that's also consistent with VRE's Alexandria Station project, that they're at 90%. We just took to the board final design just last week to move forward with that. So the projects need to be intertwined along with our Alexandria 4-track projects. So we're coming through with the 4-track. At the same time, we have these bridges that are still in okay shape, but eventually need to be rehabilitated, if not replaced. And so we've gotten to 100% engineering, and the engineering has determined that it would be best if we were to replace these bridges, the King Street Bridge and the Commonwealth Bridge, and you can see they're right next to each other. If you've been through Alexandria, I think you've been under these at some point, either walking or in a car. And also the narrowness of especially of the King Street and the shallowness of King Street, it's well below the VDOT threshold of 14.6. And there's a lot of bridge strikes. Every time there's a bridge strike, someone's got to come out from CSX, examine the bridge, and the bridge strikes don't just happen on the top, they happen on the side as well. All service stops while that person comes out, examines the bridge, and lets service move forward. So we think that while we are building the 4-track project, we should come through here, much as we're doing in Newington Road, for instance, in Fairfax County, where we're working to beat out to raise and also to widen. We think we're going to recommend today in our budget that King and Commonwealth bridges be funded as well. There have been as many as 3 bridge strikes in 30 days. People will be caught on Long Bridge, and I heard there's a bridge strike, but I'm on Long Bridge. Long Bridge wasn't struck. King Street Bridge was struck, and that stops all VPRA, Amtrak, and CSX trains. This shows some of the widening that's going to happen. And it's going to be more than 50%, right, Todd, thereabouts, of both King Street and Commonwealth. It is an old structure, 1905. And obviously, it also minimized maintenance, too, reduced maintenance. We have some new bridges. The streetscape, we've already been talking with Alexandria, will be designed by the city, so we'll take care of the rail portion. We'll lift it up, especially Commonwealth's hardly going to be lifted at all. Commonwealth's at a good height. That's well above the VDOT standards. We'll lift it up. Modern new engineering naturally widens the berth underneath. And then Alexandria can come through when we're done and add a bike lane or pedestrian lane or something of that nature. We've already been in preliminary talks with them about that. And they're very excited for the opportunity. I mentioned the bridge strikes. We estimate that VRE riders lose approximately $500,000 in personal time per strike. Plus, this is up and down the corridor. This impacts CSX, VRE, and Amtrak. Commonwealth Avenue Bridge, I used to live in Alexandria. I used to live in Del Rey. This is often the back door to get to points north in the Alexandria area and up to Arlington. Also, as similarly age structured, 1904, we will be increasing the horizontal clearance. There are bridge strikes there as well, especially when on the horizontal side. Again, for this area, the streets need to be designed by the city. They've told us they're looking at bike and pedestrian lanes rather than car lanes. There's also, I should mention, at King Street, there's a big WMATA pier that would be hard to add another road lane because there's a WMATA pier. For those who aren't familiar, on the west side of the tracks is the Amtrak station. East side of the tracks, right there is the WMATA Alexandria station. So that's 84 million. You approved $4 million in design that we're pretty much spent up on. So the request in the budget is an extra $80 million. So I'm here to talk about that. The other projects in the budget, other than New River Valley, which we already spent a long time talking about, that and King and Commonwealth are the 2 main new projects in the budget, if you will. So hence why we're talking about them. I do want to mention that schedules and the project narratives for the full budget. There's a link in I think what was sent to you. We are working with CSX to try to speed up project development as much as possible. Sometimes you don't really know what the project schedule is to bring an actual design build contractor or just build contractor on board. But some of the projects are moving at different completion timelines. Alexandria Station project is one that we expect to be complete by the end of 2026. And I know there's another note on this today, a project addendum for Alexandria 4-track with CSX that Michael and Todd are going to speak to. This project is moving along. We expect it to be done toward the end of 2026. CSX will be going out with the contractor, as DJ mentioned, soon. I hope they'll have notice to proceed by November. So happy to answer any questions on King and Commonwealth and why we're suggesting another $80 million in the budget. We don't want to have to come back in a few years and rebuild. We're going through, and One of the main things we're doing in the 95 Ford, everything we're doing is on-time performance. If we come through here and add a Ford track and don't fix a problem point of the bridge strikes that happen in King Commonwealth, it's difficult to, we want to fix those problem points as we're marching through. I mentioned Newington Road, Fairfax, we're going to improve that as well. As we continue to march further south, we'll continue to do that when there's road rail impacts. And work with VDOT, they're often very helpful, especially in Fairfax and other places. Let me answer any questions. If not, Shannon's going to take it back over.
Excellent. So we're going to move on to our next budget component, which you all have had a lengthy briefing on previously. So this is the Western Rail Corridor. As we've mentioned, we are recommending that we fund the least costly alternative at this time. So that is an increase of $200 million to the base budget changes to deliver passenger service to the New River Valley. Our next component, this is really just kind of a cleanup item. Essentially, we had a project that we were carrying in the pipeline. It was not part of our required projects last year that we had funded, well, we had unfunded. So it was sitting out there as an unfunded balance. In order to clean up, we recommend that we're going to remove the unfunded position and go ahead and remove that pipeline project as well. This grant match went out with North Carolina without our contributions, so we no longer need to do this project. Next, we have the last component of our capital budget. So this is our capital and operating grant section. We have summarized this. The primary changes that you're going to see here relate to the VPRA track lease payment. So first, we are adding that additional year in our commitment to pay 84% of that track lease payment. Additionally, there are some base changes related to those payments as well. For VPRA's mission, we do support commuter rail to sustain and enhance that service. So we will continue that commitment into FY31, and there are some base forecast changes as well, and that's what you're seeing is the base increase for these items as well. The last section, as Steve noted in the beginning, we do have to do a preliminary operations plan in order to do our overall financial planning process. However, we are coming back to the board with our one-year operations plan in June. This is just a preliminary overall from inception to FY31, what we're seeing in the operations side. So again, we are adding that FY31 year to the plan, picking up all the costs it takes to run our train operations. In addition to that, there are some base budget changes, and two of them we do want to call out. So there's been a decrease related to our Amtrak train operations. Really driving that is the assumptions every time you add new service. Now that we have a history of adding new service, we know that not all costs are variable. Some are fixed based on routes. We're actually able to reduce that, knowing that some of those will not increase every time we add new service. The other big one is the administrative cost. This is decreasing $94 million, and this goes back to the cost allocation plan that Steve mentioned. So we are undergoing a big process to look at all of our administrative costs. This is the overhead, right? It's our building, it's IT, it's benefits. Previously, we've included that in operations, all of it in operations. However, a lot of that pertains to our capital projects. So through this cost allocation plan, we will be able to take a portion of these costs and put them on the capital projects to get us a true cost of what it takes to deliver those projects, but also help us understand what the true cost of delivering our operations and running the Amtrak service will be as well. So those are the big changes in the financial planning window related to operations. Yeah.
And those administrative costs that Shannon was just talking about in the capital projects are already in those capital projects budget. So it's almost like we just had it in there twice.
Yes. Overly conservative? Okay, so the last slide we're going to talk about here is the financial summary. As you've probably noticed, we keep on talking about assumptions and updating different forecasts. So a lot of what we're building on is on a lot of assumptions, and it's not just on the uses side and the capital projects, it's on the sources side as well. We continue to just echo this message because it's why we need that management reserve and why we put it in place in the first place. We're going to talk through some of these items, the big ticket items, the ones that have been changing, and what we're doing to de-risk some of these items in the financial plan. So on the sources side, we do continue to talk about the I-66 toll financing. This is still a high risk in the plan. Just knowing what the toll revenues will be able to bring in regards to leveraging the debt is still a bit of an unknown. It is important to note that we have kicked off this process with VDOT. We do hope in the next year we'll be able to de-risk this and have a solid understanding of what the dollars coming into the plan from this financing will be. On a positive note, so the Amtrak ticket revenue financing was high last year. This year we've been able to drop it to moderate. Amtrak has been able to work with our stakeholders to vet the overall process of splitting out the expenses and the revenues so that VPRA can get those revenues and actually do the debt financing. So positive news on that front. We were able to kind of get more comfortable that that is going to actually occur. On the uses side, so we have a couple new risks that we brought into the plan. So in the evolution of VPRA, a lot of it has been focused on the capital projects and what ends at FY31. However, once we're done building all these projects, there's a lot to look forward to and what we have to do to maintain these projects, and also when we have to replace certain capital infrastructure. On top of that, you have the long-range Amtrak operations, so what it takes to run these trains. So we see that as something that we need to get our hands on. We have some base assumptions in the plan, but as we look up and out over that horizon, what is it going to take really for VPRA to remain financially solvent well into the future? So we have some consultants coming on board in the near term to help us really refine those estimates to make sure we think about the VPRA of the future as well. So that is going to round out the capital budget section. Yes, Ms.
One question.
Yeah.
Why are we pursuing a TIFIA loan? What are we looking to pay for with that?
That is going to be, so in accordance with the MOA that we have for the I-66 inside the Beltway funds, it has to go on Long Bridge. It is specifically for the Long Bridge rail component. So that's where those funds will have to be put.
Okay.
Yeah, I can, so we're not the lender on that too. I think it would be either Commonwealth Transportation Board or VDOT. The pledged revenue stream would be the tolls derived off by 16 inside the Beltway. So all those loan proceeds would be transferred from VDOT to us. On Bridge. You're not going to be TIFIA or.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you.
All right, Shannon. So if we can go back to this previous slide where we were looking at high, moderate as far as the risk rating. I mean, is that to like an 80 percentile or 90 percentile certainty?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in our plan, there's some things that are definitive. It's an amount that we can just say, the FRA grant, for example, it is $729 million.
Sure.
Then there's some that have a lot of estimates. So anything that has some sort of underlying estimate, for example, the Commonwealth Rail Fund, we're never going to put that at low because it depends on tax revenues and economists forecasting what it's going to come into the plan. So that one will likely always stay moderate. So it's really about the underlying assumptions and how sure we are of the amount coming into the plan.
Okay.
Any other questions before we pivot off capital budget? Okay, so we have two actions that we're asking the board to take today. So first is that you recommend this capital budget to the CPP to meet our February 1st submittal deadline. And then the second is that we approve our management reserve balance. In accordance with our policy, we do have to approve that quarterly. So all of the efforts we just did through the FY25 planning, we are recommending that we result in the $130 million management reserve. So we increased it to the 1.4. We have the uses that we'd like to put the funds on, resulting in that management reserve balance of $130 million. That I'm going to move to Jen.
And so we'll just ask Ms. Dorsch, the Finance Committee recommended, it came with a recommendation. I was on the phone, so I'm ask you to fill in some gaps. So when the Finance Committee met 2 weeks ago, you guys heard all of this and made a recommendation to the board.
Yes, yes. We recommended approval of the capital budget as proposed, and we recommend approval of the recommended management reserve amount of $130 million, recognizing it's less than the 5% we originally thought would be the best benchmark at the last meeting.
Thank you.
Second that motion.
All right, so let's separate. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. So let's start with the capital budget. And so this is just to allow VPRA to present this to the Commonwealth Transportation Board and comply with the law. And so the recommendation from the Finance Committee in the form of a motion is
move to approve, to recommend to the capital budget to the CTV.
second. All right, so moved by Ms. Dorsch, second by Ms. Bulova. Any further discussion? Ms. Bashu.
Mike, regarding those bridges, is that in the capital budget or the operating? You mentioned $4 million. Okay,
So $4 million was for final design. The board approved last year.
okay,
And another 80 million, so 84 million total. The budget will show 84 million. 84 million will be in the budget. 4 million was for final
for both
design.
bridges.
For both bridges, yes. Yes,
Okay,
we're at 100% designed for both King and Commonwealth. We have a no-go or no-go decision, especially since VPRA's Alexandria Station project is moving forward as well. And also our Alexandria Ford Truck project. We actually have a meeting tomorrow where some others in the room will be at with VPRA and CSX to coordinate all the schedules to make sure that there's a unified schedule for all the projects. So which tag you're in. They're building their project They have to have that done for, maybe, this is one possibility, before the forecast comes through. King Commonwealth needs to be done in right sequencing, really is what it is about. Make sure that the projects are sequenced along with each other, so you don't have to stop what you're doing. You want to make sure the sequencing is all intertwined. So we're having some meetings on that, like I said, tomorrow.
Was that in our board stuff, that comment, that those bridges, was that in our board stuff that we got?
Yes.
It was?
The PowerPoint we had, the 3 slides we added there is on the, I'm looking at the online version that's in there. It's on, yeah. It's right after the tables, the summary tables for the cost.
Shouldn't there be a narrative in the back of the capital budget document also?
Yes, there's also in our actual capital budget document, the one, 20 years ago, print up, also has a narrative for each project we have. On all the projects, King and Commonwealth, Alexandria Portrait, all the projects narrative. There's also another link on the link for the actual budget book, if you will. Back when, again, we used to print them up back in the day.
Page 15 for reference.
Okay.
To just summarize, we're not taking an action on the budget. We're just recommending it to the CTB. Code requires that VPRA present the capital budget to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. That will happen in February. Commonwealth Transportation Board then would take an action in March to basically concur in the portion of the capital budget that does come through the CTB, which is relatively small overall. And then this budget will come back to this board for a final action in June. So this is all draft. Everything is draft until June. All right, so we have a motion and a second to recommend that this budget be submitted to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. Hearing no further discussion, we'll go ahead. Mary Estelle, could you call the roll?
Ms. Bulova? Aye. Ms. Bushu? Mr. Cardwell?
Aye.
Mr. Delandro?
Aye.
Ms. Dorsch?
Aye.
Ms. Drake?
Aye.
Mr. Hall?
Aye.
Ms. Moses Ned?
Aye.
Mr. Reinhardt?
I'm going to vote yes, but I want to note my disapproval of the specific section with the alternative plan for the New River Valley expansion.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Spore?
Aye.
Mr. Watkins?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next action item for us, back to Ms. Dorsch, is the management reserve balance. Does that come with a recommendation from the?
Yes, the board unanimously recommends, not the board, the finance committee unanimously recommends to the board approval of the management reserve balance and suggested use.
I'll second that motion. All right, moved by Ms. Dorsch, second by Ms. Bulova. Any further discussion on that item? All right, hearing none. Mary Estelle, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Bulova? Aye. Excuse me. Ms. Bushu?
Aye.
Mr. Cardwell?
Aye.
Mr. Delandro?
Aye.
Ms. Dorsch? Aye. Ms. Drake? Aye. Mr. Hall?
Aye.
Ms. Moses Ned?
Aye.
Ms. Reinhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Spore?
Aye.
Mr. Watkins?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Mr. Pittard, Mr. McLaughlin, and Ms. Perry. Very comprehensive presentation. Mr. Pittard, welcome back. We're going to talk about an amendment to our investment policy.
Before I jump in, first thing I want to say to everybody is everything that we're proposing today is within the confines of the Investment of Public Funds Act, the Code of Virginia, which we are required to follow. Reiterate that one item we're actually had deviated and we're bringing back and not actually made any investments there. So just keep that in mind, that everything we're talking about is within, we're permitted to do within the Code of Virginia. And that means that we did have a good discussion at the Finance Committee on all these items. So that being said, jump right in. We classified, there's 5 different sort of classifications, and you should have gotten in your materials a red line version of these changes, so you can follow along if you'd like. So the first, and that's how, the first item is we are going to recommend to remove the ESG requirement from the investment policy. That's on page 1. To date, it has had no impact on our investment strategy. It can only potentially impact 3 to 5% of our total investment portfolio if it did have an impact. And our new investment manager, our old investment manager, because they did a lot of private wealth client work. They had developed their own internal scoring for ESG, and our old policy kind of relied upon that process. Our new investment manager is mostly public funding, and they don't have an internal scoring process for ESG. So that's part of what's driving this change also, is to be able to work within the new investment manager's process, and then to also recognize that there is no universally accepted, like when we talk later, there's Standards and Poor's, Fitch and Moody. They're all universally accepted in the financial community as ratings for different investments. ESG is still sort of at that early stage where there's 3 or 4 different, I found, ratings, but none of them have necessarily been universally accepted. So there's still a lot of subjectivity into those ratings. So moving along, second item is up within the authorized investments, and within this, within the category of supranational agency bonds, we are recommending, it's on page 6, to remove the export development Canada bonds as a potential investment option. And that is because when the new investment came on board, we took a fresh look at the investment policy and decided only the Treasurer of Virginia could actually make this type of investment, not us. And so closer reading of the Code of Virginia, we need to remove that. And luckily, we have not made any of those types of investments today. The next item was to basically look at our diversification of our portfolio. And we'd like to, once again, this is in Investment of Public Funds Act, we'd like to add asset-backed securities as a new category. And then additionally, we'd like to increase the issuer limit for corporate notes bonds from 3% to 5% to be in more alignment with the other investments than the allowable categories. Next item, I spoke on this earlier. We were going through the executive director report of the maturities. We're at a point where the Code of Virginia essentially says 5-year maximum maturity on any investment. We had implemented a policy, an additional rule of a 2-year weighted average as a maximum. And as I explained earlier, we're at a point in time where rates are expected to decline. We have you saw this earlier, we have a very significant balance of funding, which we feel, liquidity being our second, preservation principle number 1, liquidity number 2, return 3. We feel that we can take that significant $700 million balance and we can manage, it's what myself, Shannon, her team, we have to manage the liquidity to meet the expenditure of the project. So having that 2-year cutoff is sort of limiting what we can do from a return. And it's sort of, and I'll say it this way, I feel like it's our job to manage within that 5-year window. And long-winded way for me to say that we may, I'm not certain that we may end up with a maturity average of 2.5 years or 3 years, depending on looking at cash flows of projects, which are a lot better data now that we've done engineering, and then looking at the window of investments and what makes the most sense as far as trying to gain a little bit from locking in some of these higher rates today versus staying in a 3 to 9 month or 1.5 year maturity. So hopefully we can remove the 2-year average maturity limit. That's on page 7. And finally, the last item is to basically our investment manager is required through federal regulations to provide best execution for all of its clients. So I could list the federal regulation for you. So, and there are instances where they're buying a security for us where there's only really one person, one entity to buy that security from. They could go and get 2 more quotes working through, so to speak, a middleman. But then those 2 quotes are going to be higher because the middleman is going to have to be paid. So this is to eliminate that 3 bid requirement, only make it applicable if we start investing internally, making those decisions, which we can. At this time, we're not going to. only make that applicable to us and rely upon that best execution, those best execution rules from the federal regs. And with that, I will open the floor for any questions about these items.
I just had one quick question on the elimination of the ESG component. Is that the Finance Committee's recommendation? I remember that being a big deal for Director Fazat.
It is our recommendation, a unanimous recommendation. Basically, we're not taking as much of a substantive change here. This was prompted by the need to change the ESG language that's already in the policy because that was geared to our previous advisors. We say we'll get no less than a 3 or 4 under our advisor's 5-point system. We don't have that advisor anymore. We needed something else. Steve mentioned they looked around, they couldn't find another neutral, generic, comprehensive metric. And so we asked him, well, what impact did the ESG language have? And he says none, because it only applies to such a small percentage of our funds, right? This would be corporate notes, et cetera. We keep lots of our money in public sector funding. And so it wasn't a factor. He said in terms of the percentage of portfolio it could have touched was around 2 to 5%, but the ESG factor applied to that was never triggered. It was never actually a factor in this. And we had extensive discussion, and we realized that we're spending all this energy to talk theoretically. This hasn't been a factor in any of our investments. And so we thought probably the best approach right now in the absence of another metric would be to take it out.
Okay.
Keeping in mind that it's not an irreversible decision, right? We could add it back in if we find another metric that we're all comfortable with, but it was never triggered. It wasn't a factor. So we thought that this approach made sense.
Thank you.
Again,
I was going to add, I had this written down, just forgot to say it. We did, Director Bush's recommendation, we did do an extensive look at a lot of different authorities in Virginia at their current investment policy as posted. NVTA, County of Fairfax, NVTC, Port Authority, HR TAC, none of them have ESG provisions currently in their policies that are posted. So I just thought that important to share. And I kind of was saying this, this is evolving, and I'm sure some of those metrics that, the ratings that are out there now, in a few years, there'll be more of a standard that people say, this is the metric that maybe it isn't universal, but for the most part, people accept. And I think right now we're not there. So each company's kind of developing their own and getting to that point.
So is it fair to say that it would be accurate to say if someone were to ask me, the ESG metrics currently considered have yet to mature to a place that we as a board are comfortable with?
Good way.
Got to break it down.
very well said.
Well stated.
Very lawyer.
This was the subject of discussion at our finance committee, and so we came away comfortable with this recommendation.
Okay.
Further discussion? Questions? All right, so do we have a recommendation?
I move to approve the changes recommended by the finance committee to the investment policy.
I'll second that motion.
All right, motion by Ms. Dorsch, second by Ms. Bulova. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mary Stell, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Bulova,
Aye.
Ms. Bushu, Mr. Cardwell, Mr. Delandro,
Aye.
Ms. Dorsch,
Aye.
Ms. Drake,
Aye.
Mr. Hall,
Pitter's explanation, aye.
Ms. Moses Ned.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Ms. Moses. Thank you. Ms. Reinhardt,
Aye.
Mr. Spohr,
Aye.
Mr. Watkins.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Pittard, for a very time-efficient presentation. All right, next item on our agenda is the Alexandria Fourth Track Project Addendum. We have Mr. Hopkins and Mr. Westerman. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to just talk briefly about the Alexandria Fourth Track project. I understand I control find these up here.
Thought you broke it.
Glad it wasn't me. Good job. Is this his first briefing?
This is.
There we go.
It's all good here.
Good.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I'm just going to provide a brief overview, a refresher of the Alexandria Fourth Track project. Then I'll turn it over to Michael Westerman, and he'll speak to the project addendum. So just jumping in, the Alexandria Fourth Track project involves the construction of 6 miles of a new fourth track located in Alexandria and Arlington County. The northern limits of the project are at essentially the southern bank of the Potomac River, near the Long Bridge Aquatic Center. And that's where the RO interlocking is located. And then the southern limit of the project is just west of the VPRA and Amtrak Alexandria Station. So that's near the Telegraph Road overpass roughly, and that's where the AF interlocking is located. So one of the big challenges with this project is that we have a multitude, or we have multiple independent adjacent projects that are occurring within the same footprint at the same time as the Alexandria Fourth Track project. So because of that, close coordination among projects is very important. I want to just briefly run through some of these projects because they're pretty significant. So we've got 3 projects at Crystal City, independent projects separate from the Fourth Track project that we're coordinating with in Crystal City. So there's the VRE new low-level platform. Then there's the Amtrak new high-level platform. And there's also CC to DCA, which is a multimodal pedestrian bridge project that's meant to connect Crystal City with Washington National Airport. So those are the 3 projects in Crystal City that we're in close coordination with. Then moving down to Alexandria, we've got 2 projects there we're coordinating with. We've got VRE's Alexandria Station Improvement Project. And then we also have the VPRA sponsored King Street and Commonwealth Avenue Bridge Replacement Project. So again, coordination is very important. We want to make sure that no one project, including interferes with or negatively impacts any other project. So, and then as I think has been mentioned earlier today, CSX, they are responsible for directly managing design and construction with VPRA oversight. The project budget is $210 million. That includes $45 million in a federal grant from USDOT. And this is a phase 1 project, and this is really the first project to get underway as part of the Transforming Rail in Virginia program. And because of that, so it's again, phase 1 project, one of the first segments to get underway. And we have I think if you combine, to kind of put this in context here, you take the Alexandria Fourth Track project, which is a phase 1 project. You look at the Long Bridge project, which it directly connects to, which is a phase 2 project. And then you look at the L'Enfant Fourth Track project, which again is a phase 2 project. All 3 of those connect. Once we get all 3 of those built, you'll have the benefit of that is you'll have a 4-track corridor running through Alexandria, through Arlington, over the Potomac, and into DC. So big benefits from that include increased capacity, right? And then as part of the comprehensive rail agreement, we'll be able to implement new passenger and commuter rail service. And then in addition to that, with those 4 tracks right through there, we'll be able to separate passenger commuter rail from freight rail service. So those are the benefits, and really those are the actually the main goals of Transforming Rail in Virginia. And then the just project status, major milestones. So we're working to complete final design this month. We've got a construction start anticipated for later this year. And then substantial completion for construction will be by end of 2026. So, and yeah, that's it. Any questions? All right, I'll turn it over to my voice.
All right, good afternoon. So the board here momentarily will be asked to authorize Executive Director Fowler to enter into a project addendum with CSX for the fourth track project. Okay, so what's a project addendum? Well, we have this complex contracting structure that dates back to our comprehensive rail agreement with CSX in 2021. Comprehensive rail agreement is a 1,049-page agreement between us and CSX. It took us the better part of 2 years to negotiate it. It's very complex. It governs our entire deal with CSX, from acquiring the corridors that we've acquired to the full-blown construction program. It governs service. It governs long-term operations and maintenance. So it's very complex. Under the umbrella of that comprehensive rail agreement, we have what's called a master construction agreement. We actually have two master construction agreements. Why would we have two? We have two because one set of projects CSX will lead the design and construction on. There's a second set that we're leading the design and construction on. So we have a master construction agreement for the CSX-led projects. We have the master construction agreement for the VPRA-led construction projects. This project is CSX-led. So under the umbrella of that master construction agreement, for each individual project that's contemplated in our program, we enter into what's called a project addendum. So it's a project-specific agreement with CSX that defines the final scope, schedule, and budget for the discrete project we're talking about. So this is the first project, as Todd mentioned, in our whole Transforming Rail Virginia program. This is the first project that's going to hit construction. This is the first one that we're ready to ask for the board's approval and authorization to enter into a project addendum. Every contract under our bylaws that is in excess of $50 million requires board approval. So that's really why we're here today. We're talking about this project that's been in our pipeline for a very long time. The project will certainly cost over $50 million when we sign the project addendum. Again, the estimate is $210 million. When we sign the project addendum, we'll be committing to CSX. CSX will go perform the project, and we're the entity that's funding it. Okay, with that background, just a few bullet points on the structure and contents of the project addendum, which was appended to the draft resolution in the board package. So CSX has decided to lead all construction activities. They have actually already, or they're starting the early works construction activities now in anticipation of this full construction phase. CSX will competitively procure a construction contractor. So they'll issue an invitation to the industry to submit bids. Once the design is finalized, they'll get bids in the door. They'll go through the process of selecting the best value contractor. And then once that contractor is selected, we'll finalize the schedule and the maximum compensation that VPRA will pay to CSX for the project. And we'll go forward with the project from there. The project addendum sets the framework for all of those steps. And of course, CSX will lead administration of the project all the way through final completion. What's our role? Our role as VPRA is to fund the project and fund 100% of it. We're also acquiring all the right-of-way between now and November, when that contractor enters the project site and starts the real full-blown construction phase. It's our job to acquire the slices and slivers of parcels around the project area that we don't have yet, but that are needed in order to support the completion of the project. And then, of course, we have a role in administering the project as well. We're going to participate in all the progress meetings, get regular construction documentation. We have rights to go into the project site and inspect the work. We can reject non-conforming work, right? And then we have baked into the project addendum, once we have final pricing from the contractor, we will have a maximum amount of compensation that's set. That's the limit. We won't pay any more than that, absent some unforeseen condition that leads to a change order. Okay, so those are the contents of the project addendum in general. Any questions?
Yeah, excuse me. So who would own the track once it's built?
In the 4-track corridor that Todd was describing, 2 will be ours and 2 will be CSX's. 2 will be dedicated to primarily freight and 2 will be dedicated to passenger. At that point, we will have a 4-track corridor. It's almost like you can think of it as 2 corridors in one. One that's dedicated to passenger, two rails, one dedicated to freight.
So the one we're building is for freight?
So So I don't know if you know the answer to that. There are, in our suite of projects, there are some scenarios where the new thing that's being constructed is on CSX's side of the corridor, and they're shifting the old infrastructure over, and we will inherit the already existing infrastructure, and the new will be for CSX. It depends on, and Mike, I don't know.
Where there's space.
Yeah,
And there's space, if you're up in Crystal City, for instance, and up in a building up there, you can see there's more space toward the east side versus CSX's side. So that will be, that's one of the reasons they're constructing. And then when that's done, they'll deed us another track on the west. So a lot of times it just depends where there's space.
so, but we're paying for it.
We're paying for it. And they're going to construct it. And then we'll also get one of their tracks that's oftentimes shifted. Some of that tracks could be new too, because we're adding a VPRA platform, for instance. Some, you have to lay some new track as well. So we'll get, like Michael said, we'll get 2 tracks, they'll get 2 tracks. But a lot of the space up in Alexandria and Arlington, where there's space to build a 4-track, is that this happens to be on the CSX side.
Okay.
I think it's important to note too, if I may, we will own and control those 2 tracks.
Well, that's what I was, thank you, DJ. I was, who controls?
So we will have the dispatching rights. Once everything's done in 2030, we will have the dispatching rights. So we will control what's there. And look, they're separate corridors. Michael explained it perfectly. As they're being constructed, there's a requirement for interoperability. So in very extreme cases, I shouldn't say very extreme, in cases that are abnormal, the freight trains could run on ours, passenger trains could run on theirs just to get around something if there's a train that's delayed, et cetera.
So we dispatch.
On
Yeah.
our side of the corridor, yes, that's correct. And Amtrak will likely do the dispatching, but we have the control.
Yeah, of course.
All right, any other questions?
Not a question, but a comment and a concern. Michael? No, Todd, I'm sorry, Todd, Michael. And so I think, Todd, you put out really well that there's going to be a lot happening, right? In that little section, you got Amtrak, you got VPRA, you got now this 4th track, and you got the Ped Bridge. So that's a lot of egos. I just hope you know what I'm saying, DJ. You're looking.
Oh, you're exactly right. And
So I was
going to say, these guys have done extraordinarily well negotiating that already, because I mean, there's, and even more than that, there's metro things that are happening in the same quarter as well. And they've done a good job of being the good brokers that pull the people together. And really they don't have to do that.
And I realize that's great, but when things get into construction, things get a little hot. I just hope CPRA, I just hope we become more of a help to become more of a facilitator, because I think we're the gorilla in the mix in a sense.
I think they've demonstrated that on the engineering side. So I fully expect that it will carry through on construction. All right, so we have an action item before us to approve the authority for VPRA to execute a project addendum for the Alexandria 4th track project.
So moved. Paul?
Second.
It was a second. Thank you, Senator Watkins. So motion by Mr. Hall, seconded by Mr. Watkins. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mary Estelle, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bulova?
Aye.
Ms. Bushu? Mr. Cardwell?
Aye.
Mr. Delandro?
Aye.
Ms. Dorsch?
Aye.
Ms. Drake?
Aye.
Mr. Hall?
Aye.
Ms. Moses Ned?
Aye.
Ms. Reinhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Spore?
Aye.
Mr. Watkins?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Westerman and Mr. Hopkins. All right, on to our legislative briefing. Hello, Jerica.
Hello, everyone. I will apologize in advance for my voice. I have been talking a lot lately, and so I am losing it. So please bear with me as I give our state government affairs update for the 2024 General Assembly session. This is going to be just a brief, well, I'm going to stuck in a hole. It's going to be brief, but please stop me if you have any questions. I'll start here. Again, my name is Jerica Goodman. I'm the Director of External Affairs and Communications here at the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. Nice to meet you if we have not already met. This is very small. I'm the Director Hall. So I'll just start. I'm glasses myself. Some of these dates have already passed. Just want to give you some key dates for the 2024 session. It began January 20th, and it adjourns on March 9th, and there's a lot that happens in between. Last Friday was the last day to introduce bills. Crossover, which is the day that each bill has to have their last action completed in their houses of origin before they can cross over, kind of in the literal sense, to House bills can get taken up in the Senate, Senate bills can get taken up in the House. That day is February 13th. Sunday, February 18th. February 11th is maybe your Super Bowl. February 18th is my Super Bowl, or as we call it here, Budget Sunday. That is when the Appropriations and Finance and Appropriations Committees introduce their amendments to the governor's budget. He had his budget come out in December. It was December 20th of last year. And then on February 18th, the legislators will let us know what they thought of his proposals and come out with their own ideas. And then, as you can see, like I said, session will wrap up in the beginning of March. We had an election last year in November. All 140 seats in the General Assembly were up. We also went through redistricting. So there was a little bit of a shakeup, being a bit facetious. We had some resignations, some retirements, and again, this is a little small, but I just wanted to kind of capture for you all just what we have. We have a new building and almost completely new legislature. We have slim majorities in the House and in the Senate, 51-49 for the Democrats in the House, 21-19 for the Democrats in the Senate, with a Republican lieutenant governor who can break ties in the Senate. And then, like I mentioned, a lot of new members, 33% of the members in the House are serving for the first time, 45% in the Senate. We do still have some friends, as you can see those numbers on the bar to my right. That's my left. Anyway, you're right. Anyway, folks who voted for our enabling legislation. So some folks there who are familiar with VPRA and what our mission is. So I'm going to talk about our legislative priorities, but this is number one, HB 1425. It's a bill, it's a little tweak to technical. If anyone asks you what VPRA is doing, say they have just a little small technical piece of legislation that will help us in a big way. So VDOT in 2005 obtained some exemptions for the Uniform Building Code and for state fire marshal inspection for their structures, meaning outside of their vertical structures, so not buildings, but for tunnels and bridges. And so we are just looking for the same for our railroad tunnels and bridges. It's extremely important. You just heard about Fork Track, Long Branch, all of the great work we're doing, but we just want to get this clarity in the code for our government permitters. We have been running into, knock on wood, a lot of opposition at this point. The state fire marshal, DGS, the Department of General Services oversees all the building codes. They don't want to be responsible for inspecting our infrastructure, bridges and tunnels. And so they're supportive of this legislation. And now we just have to move it through the process. So that's our number one legislative priority this session. And then I went through the calendar. It's the long session, 60 days. Other legislative priorities outside of securing the passage of our legislation, like I mentioned, there are a lot of new members. And so we want to get out there and introduce ourselves, our projects, and what we're all about to those members, or reintroduce ourselves. I've been dragging DJ up the hill for the last couple of weeks. He's been a great sport. DJ is awesome, guys, if you didn't realize that. And we've had about 7 meetings, him and I together. We are like a little buddy comedy together, but taking them around, making sure leadership, folks who have projects in their districts, one of you all were mentioning, making sure that we have that connection so that the legislators themselves and their staff know that if someone has an issue, we're the ones they're going to. If someone has a question about trees in their backyard or noise from construction, whatever it is, that VPRA is who they want to come to. And then because we have so many new members, just educating them. They may not know that we exist as an agency at all. So making sure that they're familiar with who we are. And then The last thing I just want to talk about is our legislative review team. If you were here last year, we mentioned them. They're a team of experts. We've activated folks like Jason and John, who are subject matter experts for IT, procurement, our ELT, Shannon in finance, to just after I look at all of the 2,000 bills that have been introduced, farming them out to the various members of VPRA so they can give it another once over to say, yes, this could potentially impact VPRA. Let's figure out how we can influence or help or whatever it is. Or no, this is good. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Let's just follow it. And so I just want to give a shout out to our legislative review team, because you see all the work that we're doing here. So them taking out additional time to review sometimes kind of complex or boring legal language. It's really been a great help to me. So I just wanted to shout them out. Yes, ma'am.
So the legislation of Delegate Austin, what that brings about is VPRA does their own inspections? The state fire marshal or whoever, building inspector does not?
So it's in consultation with the state fire marshal. It's about the codes that we follow.
I didn't quite get it.
That was going to be, if I could, Madam.
Go ahead.
That was going to be my question. If you're going to relieve them of the responsibility, who's responsible?
It's a liability.
Number one, who owns the new bridge when we get it built?
So may I, so what this does, what the legislation does, is it's similar to the VDOT exemption. So VDOT has tunnels, VDOT has bridges, DGS, they're not the experts, VDOT is the expert on those things.
Right.
In that same vein, VPRA has the expertise for railroad tunnels and for railroad bridges. So we would be the ones responsible for setting the standards for the fire and the safety on the bridges and the tunnels that we own.
So like the Merrimack tunnel that you all talked about before lunch, that tunnel in particular, those fire and safety standards.
DJ, let me ask another question. How many engineers do we have on board that do inspections?
So that's a trick question. We have consultants that help us with that, and the consultants will help us do that. In fact, we've talked with John and John left about having, once we get into construction and once the ownership comes to us, about having an onboard inspector or perhaps two onboard inspectors that would orchestrate those consultants helping us with that.
One further question. So when does this go into effect? July 1?
It would likely be July 1, unless we did it later.
Is there pending ownership then at July 1 that we're going to have to do inspections on?
We're prepared. We would not have taken ownership yet of that. So we're going through the survey work now to take ownership. That will not be completed by July 1st.
Well, but I've heard this is not, this just for that one project. It's not, just seems it's all.
This is
No,
for
it's
the
for all.
Commonwealth.
For anything that VPRA owns.
And constructs, mostly it's focused on our new construction.
I think it's something we got to be aware of, because from a liability standpoint, if we're not doing the appropriate inspections, or our consultants are not doing the appropriate inspections, then they come after us.
No, we got to
We've got to have a budget number in there too, to pay these people as well.
The Boca Building Code covers structures. Is the VDOT, or is there a national rail standard for bridges and tunnels in rail construction?
So Mike referenced that earlier. Yes. So that's do you want to talk more about that?
E130 would cover, for instance, the safety in the tunnels, and AREMA.
Okay, all right.
The National Rail Standards. Fire, had to step out, is a member of AREMA, for instance. AREMA is a basic engineering standard that that'd be the minimum. Sometimes CSX or others might have a higher standard. So in lieu of these standards, we would follow NFPA 130 and AREMA standards. It's a very minimum.
I apologize. One more question. How about BRE? Does BRE own any tunnels?
Not tunnels, but like say for pedestrian overpasses would be an example of bridges and stuff. We follow the standards that are set by FRA and other entities and stuff for those specific structures, which require, routine inspections and stuff like that. We document all of that. The FRA checks that for us, if you will. So
You have to report to the FRA.
we have those records on file. They're subject to inspection. So.
And the Federal Highway has that as well. And usually it's consultants who do the inspections.
And that's exactly right. Consultants do that for us as well.
We've got to be aware of what those consultants are going to cost us.
And I think this is one of the things and that's all, what applies to VRA is a little different because VPRA is a political subdivision of the state. That's where DGS gets involved because it's state property and then it falls under DGS. And that's why VDOT was exempted because DGS builds buildings and not
bridges and tunnels.
So we're going to build it or have it built and pay for it and inspect it. And then we're going to be the same people inspecting it again.
We'll own it.
Yeah. As a legislator, this would make me uncomfortable. So I don't know what kind of reaction you're getting to it.
It's the same situation that happens for VDOT. It's and then they report annually.
I'm not uncomfortable with it. I'm just saying we've got to anticipate it.
What's the precedent for it? Excuse me. What's our precedent for it? I hear consultants being tossed about and reviews by various agencies. I mean, clearly there has to be a precedent that's already been established where this is not the first time it's happened. Would that be true?
That is true.
That's true.
FRA has an inspection program, so they will be inspecting this as well throughout the normal course of.
And is it pretty rigorous? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Very much so.
Yes.
Yeah. But what this does is this takes the standard setting away from DGS, who's used to setting standards for buildings, and gives it to us because of the railroad and the tunnel and bridge aspects of it. But so we'd have our own inspection program, which we would anyway, and then FRA, of course, inspects as well.
So Jericho, when you say it's the same standard as VDOT,
It's the same precedent as VDOT.
the precedent is VDOT. That's what I thought I heard you interjecting.
It's VDOT.
Okay.
They are accepted. They have their own standards.
And their practice is the same.
Their practice is the same.
Okay.
But they've got their own inspection people.
I get that, but
But they
thought
also
is,
rely on a lot of consultants.
Yeah.
I understand.
yeah.
Just so most states, so Federal Highways has the same standard. And so all the 50 states, usually they outsource that to a consultant. Sometimes they're little small niche firms, that's all they do is bridge inspections. Sometimes you have the big guys that'll have a set aside, but all they do is bridge inspections.
My point is we've got to anticipate it.
Yeah. The cost is minimum. I mean, it's not a lot.
As we're looking for opportunities to reduce our budget, this is not one of those areas.
Yes.
EJ, I'm going to ask that this coming year, we work on adding VPRA into the legislation that provides the liability coverage for people on boards. DRPT's got it. HR Tech and Hampton Roads has got it. I know we've discussed it and Michael feels like we're already protected, but if we're going out on this, I think it's too late to do it now. We're probably not in a position that we're at risk, but I'm a vote no. There's no vote on this unless I get an agreement. We're going to really look at that. I mean, it was legislation of Ron Villanueva in 2017 that added several groups into protection, but we are not in there. We weren't created then. Legislative Services did the bill. They felt it was a worthwhile bill. And it passed, and I want us in there if we're going to take on this.
Take another bill and it's too late to introduce.
Yeah, it's too late. Unless there's a bill out there, it could be added to, but I don't know that's the case. Could you check that out?
I'll check. I have nothing that I've seen.
Well, one thing that could be, if they have it, might be if Richmond has done legislation for their Transportation Accountability Commission like we have, they would have put themselves in that.
I'll check. I don't
Check that. That's the only one I could think of if that bill was in.
Okay.
No.
I'll take a look. Any questions other than the discussion we've had?
Thank you, Jericho. Before we adjourn, Mr. Hall asked, had sent a request to DJ and I to bring up an item of new business for today. And so I'll turn it over to you.
Madam Chair, thank you for your consideration. I expected this to be returned considerably, but take it as is. Colleagues, I know the hour is late. I just ask for your brief indulgence for just another minute or two. At our last meeting, we took a very consequential vote with respect to advancement of both the Long Bridge and the Franconia Springfield bypass. Outside of my vote for our very distinguished executive director, I couldn't think of a more consequential vote, if you will. And y'all may recall I had a deer in the headlights moment when the exchange between Mr. Kosnick and I I asked about the DBE applicability. And I guess I couldn't pivot, and I do apologize, I couldn't pivot away from my aviation hat quick enough to fully grasp it. But after having further conversations with FRA, I now understand. I think Mr. Westman tried to enlighten me as well. Unlike its other modal sisters, FRA stands alone in the distinction that there is no federal statutory requirement that DBE, disadvantaged business enterprise, goal setting be applied to the grant funding that they administer. And so when I went huffing and puffing to FRA, the question was why, and it makes sense. Dating back to their original creation in 1966, they really have not possessed a substantive grant outfit portfolio, if you will, outside of, and I look to Ms. Fowler for correction, outside of what they have done with respect to direct contracting to support Amtrak and developments along the Northeast corridor. And so fast forward 2009, 2015, with the advent of PREA and the authorization of CRISI and Fed-State partnership, which we've heard discussed ad nausea earlier, FRA is now fully within the federal grant-making space, two feet down, as my kids say in hip-hop slang. And so with that said, they are also substantively behind their modal sister agencies with respect to the information that they have, with respect to the efficacy of disparities and other industry trends across the industry, if you will. And so while I consider last month's vote a very consequential one, I feel that there was some unfinished business with respect to our affirmative sort of foot down trumping small business and their importance to not only the broader Virginia economy, but ensuring that they have ample opportunity to compete for business on these very substantive generational investment capital improvement projects, if you will. And so it would be of comfort to me knowing that I am formally on record and sort of voting in the affirmative on that particular issue in support of small, veteran-owned, women-owned, and minority-owned business enterprises across the Commonwealth, if you will. And so, in short, I'm not going to bore you with the whereas clauses. You have it in front of you, but I'll just call out this particular whereas clause and then get to the resolve clause. Whereas the host of transformative capital improvement projects stand to not only serve as infrastructure models for the nation, but also create opportunities for a host of qualified small businesses, particularly construction businesses, across the Commonwealth to bid on substantive work. And then I'll jump to the resolve clause. Be it resolved that the board of directors of the VPRA recognize the vital importance of small, women-owned, veteran-owned, and minority-owned business enterprises to a robust Virginia economy. Moreover, the board of directors hereby directs the VPRA to pursue any and all good faith efforts to achieve its the highest small, women-owned, veteran-owned, and minority-owned business utilization rates practical with respect to transforming rail and Virginia capital improvement projects. And so that said, I've never met a more energetic, enthusiastic person about small business utilization than our very own procurement individual. It's just for me, with respect to when I face constituents trying to explain why the FRA does not have a federal statute requiring DBE participation, being able to say we as a board have voted in the affirmative that small business is important with respect to inclusion on these capital improvement projects. And so that's a high level summary, and would appreciate your indulgence and support on that.
Any discussion?
Yeah, for clarity purposes, Mr. Hall shared this with me and I was able to read over it. And I am fully endorsed and absolutely believe it's an important move for this board to make, whether it's today or the next time. I do think it's important.
I as well think it's important, probably the right direction, but I would would request that we defer to the next board meeting and let staff go through it and come back with their agreement or recommendation, if you would, and then put it on the agenda for next month. And I would.
Madam Chairman, I agree. I think for all of us, or almost all of us, we just had a chance to look at this and skim through it quickly, just like 5 minutes ago. And so I absolutely am supportive of, I think, what you're putting before us. But I don't want to set the precedent of having us all of a sudden vote on a policy that we've just received and that staff hasn't had a chance to look at. But, I expect that when it does come back to us, this is something, I think that already we're doing or attempting to do.
No, we absolutely are. And I have no issue of tabling until the next. I tried to get in before the cutoff, if you will, so that council could have reviews. So I guess that did not occur. No issues whatsoever. To your point, they're already doing that. It's just important for me and my political jurisdiction to be on record and having said that small businesses, whether they're 1 or 5 in Prince William County, you are noticed, you are seen, and we want you bidding on these projects. Right. And I do, and on that point, I want to give a shout out to DJ as well as John. They probably get tired of me calling, but
that's a lie. That is not.
But whenever I call and I'm in need of support with respect to particularly engagement with my local Chamber of Commerce and other chambers of commerce, they've been more than happy. So I just view this as a mere natural extension of that. So I'm happy to table until our next meeting.
We will carry that over to our next meeting, which is a perfect pivot to what's on the screen. Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, June 4th in Alexandria. Yay. In Alexandria, in either, we can all take the train. Just for planning purposes, DJ and I have talked, if there's interest, we can do some tours on Monday, our projects, and get out in the field. We will do some kind of board gathering that evening. So more to come on that, but just from a scheduling perspective, you may want to block the 3rd and the 4th. So with that, we stand adjourned. See you guys in June.